Hi everyone, welcome to my live edge end table project. I cut a spruce tree with my Alaskan sawmill, did a 2-inch thick board, melted paraffin wax on the ends so it wouldn't split when it dries, put weight on it with spacers between, and it sat there in waiting for 2 years. Then I got out the router jig and planed the board on both sides so it was flat and even. Then came sanding, lots of sanding. Sanding with a belt sander, sanding with an orbital sander, felt like I was sanding my life away. I fast forwarded the sanding and cut a bunch of it out so you wouldn't get bored through this video. I decided to do a Lichtenberg burn on the top. Here I'm painting on a concoction of baking soda and water to help the burn pass through the wood. A word of caution, I'm an electrical journeyman and have a solid understanding of electricity. I don't recommend anyone do this, as if it was mishandled, it could be fatal. I have several safety systems in place to protect myself, and under no circumstances do I ever touch the electrodes or the piece when it's energized. All the burn videos have been sped up. As you can see, we're putting high voltage through and basically electrocuting the board, and it burns as it goes. Try and leave the times consistent so the burn depth is consistent as we go. Like anything in nature, electricity is lazy and will always try and find its easiest path, as you cannot control where these burns go. You can only hope to persuade them to go the direction you want, but if they decide they're going to go the opposite way, there's nothing you can do about it. Here's the piece after the completed burn before I clean it up. Here I'm starting to clean up the piece. I use water and a hard bristle brush to remove the remnants of the burn. I fast forward this not to bore you, but man, my wife wishes I could do the dishes this fast. Here's the piece just after being freshly cleaned up. Just need to let it dry and then we're ready for the next steps. Here's a piece all dried, just used a thin layer of shellac to seal the wood grain. You can see in the knot cracks and also in the wormhole, I used some 5-minute epoxy to try and seal them up so the longer drying epoxy won't run right through. Here's just some of the supplies we used to do this project. We did the shellac so the color from this mica powder mixture won't go down into the grain and we can just get it in the burn where we want it. Here I'm just laying the epoxy in the burn, letting it run where it wants to, trying not to get a whole lot of overrun with it because that just means more sanding. Another reason for spending the extra time to lay it in is that I found that the mica powder likes to drop to the bottom and we want a really vibrant color in the deep burns, which this helps. You can see here that I didn't take into account that the burn went off the edge, so a quick fix with a little bit of packing tape, boom, problem solved. Here I'm just giving it a quick torch in the deep spots to help the bubbles come out of the epoxy. We don't want any air trapped down in there, so you'll be able to see it in the final result if we do. And you guessed it, it's time for sanding again. Got some 320 grit on my orbital, and you got to be very careful when you do this not to go too deep or you'll start to take the detail of the burn out. So here it is. I used a lot of hand sanding all the way down to 600 grit to get this done. The scratches will come out in the final coat. Here I'm just making sure the epoxy is nice and mixed. This is going to be my first seal coat. Just using the squeegee to get the epoxy in a very thin layer all the way to the edges. You do this so that you trap the gases inside the wood, because if you don't, when you do your thicker layer, there'll be bubbles that you just constantly come out of the wood you can't get rid of. Didn't quite mix enough with this step, but I got 2 more seal coats to get the job done before the bubbles stopped coming, and we managed to get her done. Now we got it all spread out, just a quick torch again, just lightly to take the bubbles out so that it seals into the wood grain a little better. Here's the first seal coat, all dried, ready to go. This is the second seal coat, mixed up a little more epoxy this time. You'll see later on here that I use my hand to make sure I get it in all the grooves on the live edge so that it seals the wood up nice and tight. If you don't do this, the wood could possibly split like a couple of my other tables did. So this is a learning that I've done, and hope to improve this one so there's no splits down the road. Here it is, all ready for the flood coat. A couple different pictures, trying to get the color to come out. You can't really get the reality of how vibrant that purple is, but it looks awesome. Well, there's the top after the flood coat. May have forgot to record that part. With the flood coat, the epoxy runs over the edges and gets all these little bubbles that you have to sand off. Well, I guess they're not really bubbles, they're just hard drops of epoxy. Just use some 120 grit on the orbital. They come off pretty quick and easy. Use this time as well to clean off any marks that may be on the bottom side that I hadn't really paid attention to when I was finishing off the top. Here I'm laying out the legs, using the speed square to get the 45-degree angle that I wanted, and insetting them 1 inch on both sides. Here I'm just tracing around the legs so that I'll know exactly where I want them in the future. I repeat this for all 4 legs, which I forgot to show me cutting them on the table saw from a 4-inch piece of birch. Here you can see I have all 4 legs marked out on the bottom of the tabletop. Here I'm marking where I want the dowels. I want to try and avoid the center so that the dowels go into good solid meat of the wood. I then position the dowel jig, looking down the hole to see the X's I marked. Holes in the dowels. I repeat this for all 4 legs. Don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with that. You only got to watch 2. Here I'm just inserting the dowel taps. Then what I'll do is I'll flip the leg over, line it up with my tracing, and tap it on the end. This will give me 2 divots so I know exactly where I want to drill the holes for the dowels. So I repeat this for all 4 legs. Use a Sharpie to mark the divot so it's easier to see down through the dowel jig. Then again, I use the drill with the depth gauge to drill out the holes. Well, now it's time to put the legs onto the tabletop. Get some glue, put it around the dowel, put it in the hole. What happens with the dowel when you get the glue on it is it swells up a little bit, so then you got to get the hammer and persuade it in the hole just a little bit. So we got all 4 legs on. So now I'm just using the speed square to true up the legs. So now I just use a level to make sure the top is true after squaring up the legs. So I just used a towel and put a piece of plywood down. Then I'm going to add some paint cans on top for some weight. Just use it kind of like a clamp to hold the legs so we get a good glue job. It's the speed square one last time to make sure nothing shifted while adding the paint cans to the top. Well, time to stain the legs and the bottom of the table. Do 2 coats to hopefully get a good seal. Well, here's the finished product out in the sun. Sunlight tends to make the purple pop a little better, so that's why we're trying to take the pictures in the sun, because the camera wasn't really given the true justice how good this table looks. Well, that's the finished product. Hope you enjoyed this video. Might have learned something for it. Probably can teach me a lot of things that I messed up in it. Thanks for watching. Appreciate your time.